Hey folks, Jackdaw here. It's been 8 years since Dragon Age Inquisition released, and I still remember the excitement I felt when purchasing my copy today. Let me take you all back to the magical year of 2014, when Ed Sheeran's Thinking Out Loud hit #1 on the UK charts, Christopher Nolan's Interstellar wowed audiences worldwide, and Dragon Age Inquisition officially hit the shelves across the world. For me in Europe, Dragon Age Inquisition actually released 3 days after its North American release date, that being Friday, November 21st, and you can bet I remember that day very, very well. Me and my mum got up super early and went down to our local game store. In the UK, there is literally just a game store called Game. I'm not being facetious there. Now, at the time, I was already a massively hyperfixated Dragon Age fan, so you can imagine my hyperactive behaviour on that 10-minute car journey. At this point, I was 16, but I looked older anyway. Even so, I had my mother with me just in case I was ID'd and she could verify the purchase. We got to the till and we bought the special edition of Dragon Age Inquisition, which came with the Flames of Inquisitions pack, as well as picking up the collector's edition guidebook of Inquisition. Now, of course, we yeeted back home, and the moment I put that disc in my Xbox One, my life was forever changed. 8 years after first playing it, I am still deeply in love with Dragon Age Inquisition. Hands down, it is my favourite Dragon Age game. However, since it has been so long, today I want to retrospectively review Dragon Age Inquisition, exploring each of its core features and explaining what I love about the game and what I don't love about the game right now in 2022. Also showcasing how the game has evolved over time. I feel like this review will be great for fans of Dragon Age Inquisition, as well as those who haven't played the game in a while, or in fact have never played it at all. This video will be as spoiler free as possible, so if you've spent the last 8 years not giving Dragon Age Inquisition a shot, maybe I can help convince you otherwise. But let's start by exploring the initial vision of Dragon Age Inquisition and a fundamental question I have behind this video. So in the said Inquisition's Collector's Edition guidebook that I bought upon release, it includes an interview with Inquisition's creative director Mike Laidlaw, who explained BioWare's goal of creating Dragon Age Inquisition. In Inquisition's pre-production, the leadership teams wanted a game that could be played for 20 hours or 200. BioWare wanted a game that scaled, one that could be enjoyed in whatever way the player wanted. It was a major challenge, but after a few months, Mike Laidlaw was in front of the team pitching a new idea: actively driven gameplay. Rather than focus on major story moments leading directly to more story moments, they would give the player a goal and let them decide how to achieve it. This desire became the foundation of Inquisition. BioWare's latest foray into Thedas was even more ambitious than ever before. The developers wanted players to be able to discover new activities in a vast world that encouraged true discovery, after which they could dive back into rich story content with unique experiences for each player. The series' new graphics engine, the Frostbite engine, the next generation of console hardware, and cooperative adventuring for the first time in the series made this all possible. Now, here and now, it's clear that Inquisition's original vision was achieved upon launch. However, I am pondering, was this actively driven push a good thing for the series? Well, let's explore that question while looking back at Dragon Age Inquisition 8 years later. We'll start with Inquisition's story. As I said in my Baldur's Gate 3 video, the story is the most critical aspect of any RPG. It can make or break a player's experience with a world. Now, Dragon Age as a whole has no shortage of captivating tales, and that remains the case with Inquisition. As spoiler-free as possible, the premise of Dragon Age has always been an exploration of what would happen if Faustian bargains were a real possibility, i.e., what sorts of deals might people make with the devil if he was a literal physical thing that you could bargain with. The world of Thedas hangs in a strange moment, like an Enlightenment-era Europe, unable to break the fetters of religion because demons really do exist, creating a strong cautionary nature of the story arcs and their historical parallels. Inquisition in particular takes place 10 years after the events of Dragon Age Origins and 2 years after the epilogue of Dragon Age 2. The game begins as a spirit figure helps you escape the Fade. As you're pushed through a rift, you're suddenly back in the Ferelden village of Haven with no recollection of what happened. It turns out that you are the lone survivor of a sky-tearing explosion that took place at the Temple of Sacred Ashes. The Temple of Sacred Ashes was originally a neutral meeting place for the warring Templars and mages. The Divine herself proceeded over the negotiations to strike a deal between the two groups in hopes of peace, attended by many nobles, diplomats, and other important figures in Thedas. However, this sacred temple was destroyed in a dangerous explosion that ripped parts of the Fade into the waking world, eviscerating frustrating everyone present but you. You find yourself propelled into the mysteries of this narrative head-on as the Inquisition, an ancient crusade that seeks to bring reform and order to the land, attempts to understand what happened, repair the hole in the sky, and find those responsible for murdering the divine and everyone else. You become the Inquisitor, forging partnerships with up to 9 companions, traveling across many parts of southern Thedas on an epic quest to restore peace to a crumbling world by uniting disparate factions against a common enemy, demonic breaches between worlds that are wreaking havoc on the land and its people. Your choices as Inquisitor will have a decisive impact on the course of history, and you will be able to make your mark on large-scale events. Will you be loyal or rebel, compassionate or ruthless? Your decisions will determine how factions rise or fall, who lives and who dies. In true BioWare fashion, a large aspect of Inquisition's journey is navigating conversations through customized dialogue options. The dialogue is superbly well written as large parts of the story unfold in pivotal conversational moments. The voice acting is still masterfully delivered. A massive shout out to Harry Hayden Patton and Alex Wilton Regan's performances.
Spending time with such an engaging woman is never unpleasant, Lady Montilier.
I don't even know how to deal with all this. Just make something up. It'll be fine.
Chef's kiss. Absolutely love both the British Inquisitor voices. Their delivery is just perfection. And also, many of the jokes and banter hold up even 8 years later, which is just proof of BioWare's excellent writing teams.
All this for me. And I didn't get Alexius anything.
Send him a fruit basket. Everyone loves those.
8 years on, Inquisition still has an intriguing narrative with many challenging mysteries that become increasingly absorbing as you progress. The ending still has you playing through the story again with an elven character to get a different perspective on certain characters and how they behaved throughout the entire game. And that particular perspective is paving the way forward strongly for the next Dragon Age game. However, one massive drawback to Inquisition's story is its lackluster villain known as the Elder One, who remains an uninspired, one-dimensional villain with a cliché motivation to this day. With much reflection, what's most upsetting is that the Elder One actually has a really interesting backstory with a compelling, morally grey motivation, which is largely explored only through codices, not actual cutscenes or conversations or game-to-game moments. What we do experience in-game with this villain doesn't live up to what was established for them in their backstory. Now, it's especially upsetting when you look at BioWare's record of masterfully crafted villains in the past, like Saren and the Elusive Man in Mass Effect, and even Loghain in Dragon Age Origins. These very morally nebulous characters that don't really have a single motivation, but it's understood and palpable. The Elder One is a villain that technically BioWare has been building up to since the beginning of Dragon Age Origins. They appear in the opening tapestry sequence, and it's a damn right shame that they didn't live up to their full potential. However, on a massive plus side, the Elder One's involvement in Inquisition's narrative did help set up the next foreboding villain of the Dragon Age, which is one of the reasons why I'm not going to be too hard on the Elder One's establishment, because the setup for our next dreaded villain has been perfectly crafted. You see, Dragon Age Inquisition's ending DLC, which came out in 2015, known as Trespasser, offers a completely different perspective on the base game's narrative. The DLC essentially contrasts certain plot points and character motivations with those in the base game, thus directing a more profound and deep plotline at some points where the Elder One failed to hit the mark. It takes that lackluster villain, turns them on their head, and says, actually, they weren't even the beginning of what's to come. You thought they were bad? Ha! You ain't seen nothing yet, Chief. I merely enabled their plan. So even though one of my major gripes with Inquisition's base villain is still a valid and understandable critique, especially if you haven't played Trespasser and it's been 8 years on and you only remember that lackluster villain, even so, BioWare did manage to find some redemption with that in their post-launch content. And honestly, with such an epic setup for the next villain, they have the potential to be legendary. And while this video isn't going to focus on that because I focus on that in like every other video I've made, as a whole, it feels like Inquisition's narrative and its DLC is largely based on establishing the next game's narrative at its core, sacrificing the Elder One and their narrative in order to achieve that. And while that has worked out for BioWare BioWare in the end, it's still really sad to see this lackluster villain being utilised in Inquisition's base story. Now, speaking of which, although the game's narrative is compelling, Dragon Age is ultimately defined by its cast of characters. Now, before I gush over Inquisition's ragtag group of best friends, the setting of Inquisition is a character in its own right. The political and morally nebulous complexities of the game's world, combined with its vast explorable areas, create a rich experience for the player. Thedas is a realm defined by beauty, conflict, and turmoil. Each nation boasts its own unique history and culture, from the rolling hills and vibrant forests of Ferelden with its abundance of wildlife, to the politically charged and towering Orlais with its vast plains, meticulous cities, and sweeping lakes. Each area has its own unique charm. For a lot of fans like myself, Dragon Age Inquisition is all about relationships. It's about the friendships that develop between characters, and it's about how those relationships evolve over time. In my humble opinion, the characters in Dragon Age Inquisition are some of the best I've encountered in a video game. To this day, I still adore and think about many of them. The variety of personalities and relationships represented is impressive, and each character has their own quirks that make them truly interesting and unique. Whether it's Cole's childlike innocence, contrasted with him as an assassin, or Cassandra Pendergast's unwavering faith, each character is a pleasure to interact with. And the reactive approval system, where characters judge your every decision and respond accordingly, is still one of the best mechanics in role-playing games ever. It requires you to think about every option you're about to make and what consequences it could have on you, on the Inquisition, and on the characters of this world. One of the reasons I love this feature so much is because it keeps players constantly engaged with the game. However, this system only works if you care about the characters in the world. Now, luckily for Dragon Age Inquisition, all of them are amazing and you genuinely do care about this approval system. As I said before, as much as I love Inquisition's story, it's the characters that define it. They give it life and they make it what it is, and that should always be the case with a BioWare game. I particularly love Solas, no surprise, the prideful, hot-headed elven apostate mage who joins the pack in the prologue. He's a wise man with insight and sound advice for anyone willing to listen, and as you get to know him better, it becomes clear that he has seen the best and the worst of humanity, witnessing entire empires crumble and fall, in the Fade, of course. At times he is complicated and lonely, but he's a comfortable loner, like someone who has seen enough to justify a life of solitude. Kind of a man in a different time, a trope I, as a Doctor Who fan, freaking love. And most importantly, Solas is reactive to you and will form an opinion based on your decisions. However, ultimately and heartbreakingly, he's one of the few characters where his goal will constantly remain the same. And whatever that turns into, we're just gonna have to wait and see, but it just showcases the agency that BioWare give their characters. Regardless if Solas likes you or not, he's got his own shit to deal with and he's gonna do that his own way. Oh, and 8 years on, that twist, yes, that twist, is still just as incredible, and I absolutely love hearing people play Dragon Age Inquisition for the first time and they get to that twist and their reaction to that twist is always something phenomenal. All round, it's fantastic exposition and character development by the entire writing team at BioWare. And then we have Flemeth, the Witch of the Wilds, another one of my favourite Dragon Age characters. The twists and turns that were developed in Inquisition have truly established her as one of the most powerful, fantastically well-written characters in the entire series, and potentially she could even be eponymous of the games themselves. Her story continues to be filled with mystery and fear. You might not always know exactly what Flemeth is getting at, but you just know better than to argue with her. And they are just two examples of some of my favourite Dragon Age characters that Inquisition has developed on and has created. But Inquisition is full of them, and BioWare's talent still lies heavily in their character writing, and it is one of the most exciting things going ahead. Let's jump ship and delve into Dragon Age Inquisition's gameplay. Mark Darrah, executive producer of Dragon Age Inquisition, said that BioWare wanted to redefine many things with Inquisition. They wanted it to be a return to the series' roots by emphasizing exploration. They wanted it to re-embrace some of the more core elements of the genre, like crafting, and they also wanted to give visuals a seat at the table equal to its gameplay. BioWare was determined to ensure that every location in the game would contribute to the Inquisition's goals, every space having a thematic consistency with the overarching plot, as of which the Inquisitor travelled throughout Ferelden and Orlais, as the Elder One's plan involved both their political forces and the Breach, which was a massive hole in the sky centered right in the middle of the two nations. Inquisition features a wide range of playable classes and races, each with their own unique abilities. The game also allows you to upgrade your characters through a skill tree system, giving you the opportunity to customize your playstyle. In fact, for the first time in a Dragon Age game, BioWare added the Qunari as a playable race, allowing you to experience one of Thedas' Atreidas's lesser known and more mysterious races hands-on. Or should I say horns-on? Bad pun, but even so, the implementation of the Qunari was a fantastic addition, showcasing a brilliant change that BioWare made having listened to the fans. With 9 possible party members, 3 distinct classes, 9 subclasses, various weapons, and hundreds of abilities and passives, Inquisition provided an unparalleled level of freedom with an ample range of tools and tactics for the player to choose how their character will fight. Its combat encounters truly provide numerous opportunities for strategy. According to lead encounter designer Daniel Cadding, the most important philosophy behind creating fun encounters is the enemies exist to be defeated, and by ensuring there are multiple clever routes towards that goal, then all Inquisitors and their parties will find an opening that they can exploit with their own unique powers. One of the key elements in combat that returned in Dragon Age Inquisition after its absence in Dragon Age 2 was the tactics system, an isometric camera that allowed for more precise control over specific characters. The tactics camera is very similar to a real-time strategy game and late 90s role-playing games. In theory, the tactics system was designed for pausing a combat sequence and issuing a series of commands for your entire team, strategically taking down enemies with ability multi-combos and calculated maneuvers. In practice though, and 8 years later, I have rarely used the tactics system. Overall, it did feel underutilized and tacked on. I did find the system useful for my nightmare difficulty run through, and having the ability to pause the game and ponder your next move is genuinely a fantastic resource. However, on lower difficulties and multiple replays, the system does feel fairly redundant, but I am speaking as a hardcore fan. Despite that, I have been told by many people that tactics has been a useful tool for accessibility and approachability for many different kinds of players. So just because I don't use it as much doesn't mean it's without its use for others, and it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be implemented in the future. So 8 years on, Inquisition's gameplay has a lot to offer its players, and one of the most memorable aspects of the game has always been the epic dragon battles that are across the world. From the first time you see one on the horizon to the first time you battle one, it is an unforgettable experience. And to this day, these battles are still just as legendary. The increasing challenge, the epic collaborative team effort, and the mighty loot make slaughtering dragons one of the most rewarding activities in the game. Now, speaking of the world, let's move on and talk about the open world dynamic of Dragon Age Inquisition. For the first time, Dragon Age Inquisition features a hub-based open world, giving the players the freedom to explore and set their own goals as the Inquisitor, i.e. the story guides the player through many different open areas, offering plenty of distractions along the way, providing many opportunities for players to stray from the path if they so wish. There are many things that you can also do in these hub-based worlds, each relating to the story of the Inquisition, i.e. you can close fade rifts, establish camps, complete quests and requisitions, even identify many areas landmarks, contributing to the Inquisition's influence in the world at large. In a pinch, it's a fantastic marriage between the story and the gameplay. As the Inquisitor explores each region and grows the Inquisition's reach, the story also advances, eventually building from a few followers to a world-changing force that you can feel as you engage in these activities, like capturing keeps, recruiting agents, killing dragons, and so much more. As your fame and power spread, new opportunities are opened up via the war table, directly advancing the critical path. For example, you can explore an area and then you can send your forces out to unlock new areas and parts of the story to explore further, in turn rewarding the player for their exploration and time. These semi-open worlds showcase BioWare's desire to let players experience a far wider range of Thedas than ever before, from the snowy peaks of the Frostbite Mountains to the deserts of the Western Approach, to the bogs of Ferelden and the jungles of the Arbor Wilds, as well as plenty of other places in between. Inquisition's world is truly breathtaking, and 8 years on, the environments are just as wonderful and detailed, and the Frostbite engine holds up perfectly today. However, with that said, on a second playthrough, the cracks in the open world content do begin to show, and you realise that a lot of these activities are fetch quests that you really don't want to play again. 8 years on from that, fetch quests in massive hub-based worlds have become a fundamental issue of BioWare as of late. Mass Effect Andromeda repeated Inquisition's open world approach and essentially replicated the same kind of content, and it just hasn't gelled very well. There's a lack of actual substantial content. Now, one justification I had for this type of content, and emphasis on had, was when Inquisition came out in 2014, I very much enjoyed the myriad of activities available to me. As somebody who was 16 at the time, in college with no job, I didn't have that much money at all, and when looking at new games, I wanted the big, bulky bulky RPGs that would get the most value for my money. So playing a game with so much content, even if it partly felt meaningless, meant I was getting the most time out of my money. I genuinely had so much fun exploring and questing in Thedas for hundreds of hours, despite the repetitive nature of Inquisition side content. However, I do see the cracks in the content approach now. It feels more like padding out the game with a plethora of semi-content as opposed to building those few quality side content quests that enhance and bulk the overall narrative. And I mean, 8 years on from that, I still love the hinterlands and exploring the nooks and crannies of each world. And yes, there is a lackluster of side content, and yes, it is mostly fetch quests, and no, I will not pick up all those shards for a 7th time just to unlock a Qunari face paint. Gaining power and influence by exploring the world and doing trivial tasks does feel fun for a while. But now that I do have a full-time job and I'm managing YouTube, and I also want to follow other hobbies and other interests, I just don't have the time for this kind of content, especially when many other games are also following this routine too. Ubisoft. So I really do hope for future BioWare games that they adapt and have more quality focused content. Now moving on to the biggest hub of them all, Skyhold, the Inquisitor's personal crib, is technically a symbolic 10th follower of the Inquisitor. Throughout the entire narrative, Skyhold reflects the state of the Inquisition, and as such represents the setback endured by our team. The Inquisition arrives to find a disheveled, broken stronghold. It requires the people to come together and overcome the hardship. It represents hope against a seemingly insurmountable obstacle. The stronghold develops throughout the narrative as new features and elements are added until the very end. As a whole, Skyhold is a true home to the Inquisition, offering comfort and familiarity. Here you can develop friendships, romance plots, choose a class spec, shop with merchants, craft new gear, and so much more. 8 years on, Skyhold to me is my favourite BioWare hub. The stronghold provides so many extraordinary experiences that solidify Inquisition as an epic fantasy game. From the first cutscene to becoming the Inquisitor, to the vast amounts of conversations and character moving moments, and of course the romance scenes between the Inquisitor and their Blorbo. I love Skyhold, and it will forever have a special place in my heart. Hopefully we don't see the Inquisitor returning there for some like really crazy plotline in Dragon Age 4 involving like the fall of the veil, I don't know. Now I want to move on and talk about a surprising but fantastic artistic impression on what I love about Inquisition's user interface. You see, Inquisition's UI follows a very fitting metaphor derived from the game's initial premise, i.e. that being themes of the supernatural and altered visions. This metaphor manifests in several ways, like the magical ocularum skulls, the Astarium stargazers, runes eliminated by Veilfire, and most importantly, the tarot card system for selecting your party. The characters in Inquisition are represented by tarot cards which evoke themes of faith, destiny, and fate, such themes that are intrinsically tied to an RPG, especially one like Dragon Age where the player has a certain level of control over their companions. I just think that this is a fantastically well done and incredible artistic decision that clicks so freaking well for the franchise. And so now we come to that question: was actively driven gameplay a good push for Dragon Age Inquisition, as BioWare's leadership teams requested in pre-production stages? In some cases, yes. Inquisition has beautifully designed open worlds with plenty of things to do. Never before have we had such an open experience of Thedas, filled with party banter, quests, and areas to explore, all attached to the main story. In some cases, no. Actively driven gameplay has been a direct hindrance to the story. For example, power and influence were distractions for those who just wanted to have a hardcore experience of Dragon Age's story without having to destroy Phaedrifts in the hinterlands for hours on end. Ultimately, BioWare's decision to pursue an actively driven gameplay system has been justified by its story and the gameplay that they wanted to have with Inquisition. Holistically, it wouldn't have worked any other way in my humble opinion. How can you have a game about the sky tearing apart and demons coming out if you don't have a semi-open world to explore, if you don't have Phaedrifts to destroy, if you don't have insurmountable enemies in these worlds causing up chaos? Inquisition needed to have all of these features in order to tell the specific story that it wanted to create. In my humble opinion, and I think that my 16-year-old self would agree, I'm very grateful that BioWare went with this actively driven gameplay approach. And so in summary, for over 8 years, I've been playing Inquisition and putting thousands of hours into this game on multiple different platforms. This is why I have an entire YouTube channel heavily dedicated to the series. I'm still in love with this game. Inquisition is my favourite Dragon Age game with its complex story, memorable characters, and fantastic combat. And ultimately, there are many more personal reasons why it's my favourite. It came out at a time when I needed escapism, and I've tremendously attached to so many of the game's characters. And yes, despite its flaws, I thoroughly enjoy its story. The Inquisitor is my favourite protagonist interest in video games full stop, and I wholeheartedly love every aspect of their journey, from the Temple of Sacred Ashes to the Winter Palace. And so 8 years on, I 100% approve of Dragon Age Inquisition, and I suggest that if you haven't tried out this RPG, please try it out for yourself. Don't just take my word for it. My good friend Lambo, another Dragon Age YouTube content creator, has something to say himself about Dragon Age Inquisition.
Is Dragon Age worth playing in current year? Yes. Play it or perish.
But anyhow, folks, let me know all of your opinions on Dragon Age Inquisition down below. What is your review on this game? How has it aged for you 8 years later? Are you still in love with this game? Do you prefer the other Dragon Age games? Let me know all of your reasons down below. But until the next one, of course, you're already in the right place for all of the latest news updates on Dragon Age, Dread Wolf, and Baldur's Gate 3. I've been Jackdaw, and I should go. Whoa, 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 whoa.